On August 26 of 1966, an officer by the name of Ernest Jones attempted to arrest Roosevelt Saunders. Saunders escaped into a crowd causing unrest in the African American and Hispanic community. This event sparked an event that will later be remembered as the Waukegan race riots. Mayor at the time was Robert B. Sabanjan. His highest level of education was high school, and he served mayor for 3 consecutive terms. This is the home of the mayor at 706 Cummings Avenue. During the time he lived there, a cocktail bomb was thrown at his car, but he was not harmed. Besides the situation going on, the mayor decided to establish a curfew. This curfew was established Monday night, August 29, 1966. All people were ordered to stay off the streets, and they would get arrested for breaking curfew if not. The reason for this curfew was because many riots were breaking out around Waukegan. Before the curfew was enforced, the mayor called the minorities animals because he believed animals did not think, and the actions the minorities were taking were not thought out. The general area where the riots began were South Avenue, 10th Street, Sheridan Road, and McAllister Avenue. The actions the mayor referred to was rioters lashing out and using Molotov cocktails, also known as makeshift glass bombs. They targeted local businesses and random cars driving by. Innocent bystanders had been seriously injured and put into intensive care because of the severe burns covering up to 20% of their bodies.
My friend and I were coming out of our PE class, going up to our math class that we had together, and we heard just a bunch of screaming and shouting, and looked down from the second floor to the first floor hallway and corridor, and there were people down there just pounding at one another.
Do you think the minorities had good reason?
Partially I do. I believe at that point in history they were looked down on, as a lot of them.
How did the riots affect you if they did?
How did they affect you? You really see the bad side of everything. You see people that are normally good people, but because someone was a different color, that affected the way they thought about that person, how they cared about that person. Made me look at the world a little bit differently. At that point in time, you're not sure yet that there's a lot of differences between you and other people. And then you realize that even though they're your friends, even though you're in school with them, you work with them, you realize that there's a difference.
So what were your views on the whole situation?
I couldn't understand how something like color could affect people to be that mean. Just out and out meanness is what I saw. Just meanness. Because you were a different color than me, that gave me the right to hurt you, or you the right to hurt me. Just made no sense.
Do you know the mayor, Sabanjan?
Sabanjan was his name at the time. Mm-hmm.
What was your opinion on him?
He was a very good mayor. He was a very strong mayor. He had a lot of support. He was mayor for a long time. Every time he was up for election, it would be a landslide election. There was no one that could run against him that could even generate anything close to the amount of votes he voted for. He's very strong. He ran the city with they used to call him Iron Bob. He ran the city with an iron fist, and he did a good job of running the city, in my opinion. Of course, the whole police force, and they had police from other towns come in. At one point in time, I believe they had the National Guard come in when it got really bad one night. I think he could have handled it a little differently personally, because he sat on the back of a paddy wagon with a shotgun. And just dared anybody to come near his police force or him. But that's how he was. He was just Iron Bob, you know. And I don't think being a mayor, I don't think that was a good thing to do as a mayor. You've got to lead a little bit better than that. Leading with violence and threats just doesn't work. My name is John Hersman. I'm 63 years old. I live in Waukegan now, up by the airport. At that point in time, I lived in Waukegan by Glen, Flora, and Jackson on Walnut Street.
When you were 12 years old at the time?
I was 12 and 13, one of the 2 years that we really had to pedal those.
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
66.
Do you live in Waukegan?
I lived in Waukegan until 1985, and then I moved to Lake Villa, which is about 15 miles west of here.
Where did you live at the time?
In Waukegan? Mm-hmm. I lived, do you know where Belvedere Park is? I lived over by Belvedere Park, a little street called Cook Court.
How old were you when the riots occurred?
16. I mean, it seemed like problems started happening in Waukegan that I was aware of in 1966. I was 16, but then 67 into 68. 68 was the year I was a senior in high school, and that's when it was the worst in the school.
What do you recall from the event?
Well, I'll tell you what I remember. In 66, before it really started in the schools, have you heard of the name Robert Sabanjan? He was the mayor at the time. And I think he did a lot of good for Waukegan, but, you know, back then, and I think the racial mix, it was predominantly white. There was a black community on the south side, and there was a Puerto Rican community. And everybody kept their distance, so everything was calm. And no one really knew how to deal with each other, but no one had to, because everybody kept their distance. And what happened was, there was 1966, there was some fights that occurred between the blacks and the Puerto Ricans. There weren't many Mexicans in town, as I recall. And what happened was Mayor Sabanjan got involved and started calling those people that did that scum. He had no idea how to deal with that kind of problem because it never happened. And a lot of the people in the community got mad about it, and you know, I can relate it to our current President Trump. You know, this Make America Great Again really is code for Make America White Again, as far as I'm concerned. And people were really ticked off that the blacks and the Puerto Ricans were fighting. What they did is they tried to have a meeting with the NAACP to calm it down, and Sabanjan met again and didn't back down and continued to call those people scum. And then they wanted to march. And they wanted to march, you know where McAllister Avenue is?
Yes.
In that area and Genesee Street. And the city wouldn't allow more than 100 people to march. And if there was more than 100, they were going to get arrested, whether they were peaceful or not. And then if they got arrested, Sabanjan came right out and said that if you get arrested and you live in public housing, we will evict you. I mean, they were going to kick them out. They wanted them out of town. So that's when it really started. But then in school, the next year, and you know, I had a lot of friends, and I attribute a lot of the attitude with the white people to almost, you know what hippies are? Mm-hmm. Before that, there was surfers, and there was greasers. The white guys were either surfers or greasers, and they were looking for fights, and that's what was going on. The greasers were getting ticked off that a lot of the black and Hispanic community was starting fights, so names started being called. Have you ever heard of a name, Larry Tempest? Larry Tempest was a bad person, and I think he's still a bad person. He's got to be close to 90. He's an alderman. He's an alderman in Waukegan to this day. But he was, at the time, wrestling coach at Waukegan High School, and he was a driver's ed coach. And he would call a lot of people derogatory names. He was using the N-word all the time, and it was causing a lot of problems. I remember my senior year started the fall of 67. I graduated June of 68. And there were the people that were starting the riots in the school, there was a lot of black people coming in from Chicago. They weren't Waukegan people. These were older people that were coming that were trying to start fights. And all of a sudden the cops, for the very first time, they were bringing cops in the schools. We never had police in the schools up until then. And we had cops all over the hallways. These guys would come in and try to start fights. There were girls that would take girls with long hair into the bathroom and cut their hair and beat them up. And I remember one time specifically, I was so worried. I had a little girlfriend at the time, and I would walk her to her class so she wouldn't get hurt. And then I would run to my class so I wouldn't be late. Do you know where in East Campus, you call it Washington Campus now? You know, there's two buildings. The building on the north side, there's a third floor. And back then, there used to be next to nothing up there. And I was up there. I had to go across the parking lot to the other building for band. I was in the high school band, so I had to go over there. And the bell rang. I was all by myself in the hallway. There was nobody there. But I had to get over there. So I was up on the third floor, and I was the only one there. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by 10 guys. And there were 10 black guys. I didn't know any of them but one. And one of them was a friend of mine. And I don't even remember his name now. And these guys were going to beat me up. And I said, come on, man. You and I have been friends since junior high school. You're going to really let these guys do that to me? And he talked to them, and he stopped them. And they let me go.
Do you think the minorities had a good reason for rioting?
I think no one has a good reason for rioting. I think a lot of people have a good reason to protest and march, and I think, yes, they did have a good reason to do that because, again, they weren't being treated fairly, and they had some issues, and the city's response was a response that they didn't know how to, you know, they had a reason to protest and march, but no one knew how to handle it. It never happened before. It never happened before. Everybody went to their churches, went to their picnics, went to their schools.
So your views is that it was kind of a disruption?
It was a big time disruption. But like I said, I don't even the riots that we have now, I don't think that solves a thing. But I think peaceful demonstration and marches when you've got a legitimate gripe, I think is valid. During the same time, I was protesting against the Vietnam War. So I was doing the same thing for a different reason.
Did the riots affect you, and if so, how?
I don't know if it affected me. It bothered me. It affected me because I had so many friends. See, I was a musician back then. I was in the band, but I was in rock and roll bands too. And one of my first rock and roll bands, when I was a senior, it was a 9-piece band. I was the only white guy in the band. We played black parties. So these were my friends. So it you know what? It broke my heart to see that kind of crap happen. That's really what it was.
So what were your opinions about the mayor?
The mayor did a lot of good for Waukegan. I was young, so I didn't know that I didn't understand what politics really was. I know that he did a lot of deals behind closed doors to get services done for the city, to get businesses in the city. I think he did a lot of good, but when it came to that, when it came to racial relations, I don't think he had a clue how to do it, how to handle it.
We had a question because we were reading newspapers in the Historical Society, and it said something about how he called minorities animals.
He did. He called them scum. That's what it was. One of the names. There was a couple of names. He called them, druggies and scum. I mean, that's how he was referring to them when they were, not agreeing with what he wanted them to do.
No, if you have any other comments, you could say that.
I don't think so. I mean, I kind of just spit it all out.
Okay, thank you.
All this ties up to Waukegan becoming more diverse over the years. All these situations opened the eyes of the people and helped them learn from it.